Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The untouchable alien empire, until a human battleship found them. In the vast expanse of space, where the stars were scattered like diamonds on a dark velvet blanket, the galaxy had lived in an uneasy peace for decades. The powerful Zorth Empire had ruled over the outer sectors, their warships patrolling every corner of the galaxy. The Zorth were feared by all, their technology was far beyond anything other species had ever seen, and their fleets were nearly invincible. No one dared to challenge them, for it seemed impossible to break their grip. Captain Ethan of the human fleet knew this better than anyone. He had spent years studying the Zorth Empire's strategies, learning their weaknesses, and calculating every possible move. But even he had never expected things to unfold the way they did. The Zorth thought they were untouchable, hidden away in the dense asteroid fields near the edge of the galaxy, their main fleet well protected and nearly impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. The human fleet, however, had been watching for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ethan paced back and forth on the command deck of his battleship, the Resolute. His crew was ready, but so were the Zorth. He could feel the tension in the air. They had no idea what they were about to face. "They don't see us coming, sir," said Lieutenant Harper, her voice steady but filled with excitement. She stood at her station, monitoring the Zorth fleet's movements on the screens in front of her. Captain Ethan looked at the map. The Zorth's main fleet was positioned near the asteroid belt, but they were too confident, too comfortable. They believed their defenses were unbreachable, but that was before humanity came up with a plan no one saw coming. "We have one shot at this," Captain Ethan said in a low voice. "Make it count." The human fleet had been silently maneuvering through the asteroid fields, using the debris as cover from the Zorth. The idea that anyone could hide in these dangerous fields was laughable, but the humans had something the Zorth didn't: resourcefulness. Using their ingenuity, the humans had constructed stealth technology that allowed them to move in the shadows undetected for hours. Ethan's fleet had been silently advancing, inching closer to the Zorth's vulnerable flank. The Zorth ships, large and imposing cruisers, lazed about, unaware of the threat lurking nearby. "The time has come. Now," Ethan commanded, his heart pounding in his chest. "Take them by surprise." The crew of the Resolute sprang into action, their movements coordinated and practiced. The first wave of attacks launched with incredible precision. The Zorth ships were caught off guard, their massive warships exploding in brilliant flashes of light. It was as if a quiet storm had suddenly erupted around them, leaving their once feared fleet reeling. The Zorth scrambled to respond, their command centers descended into chaos. Communications were lost as human fighters weaved through the enemy lines, firing from every direction. Despite their size and strength, the Zorth were not prepared for this kind of attack. "This is impossible," a Zorth commander shouted as his ship shook under the barrage of fire. "How are they here?" Back on the Resolute, Ethan's heart raced. The first strike had been successful, but the battle was far from over. He could see that the Zorth were beginning to regroup, sending reinforcements to retaliate. He had expected this and had a plan, but the real question was, would it be enough? "They're launching counterattacks, Captain, we need to act fast." Lieutenant Harper's voice broke through the tension. Ethan gritted his teeth. He had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, the pressure was unimaginable. His fleet had already taken a few hits, and the Zorth were preparing their most advanced weapons. If they could unleash those, the tide of battle might turn against them. "We won't let them win," Ethan muttered more to himself than to anyone else. He turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare the next wave, we hit them where it hurts. Right now we have the upper hand, but it won't last long." As the battle raged on, Captain Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. For years, humans had been underestimated by the rest of the galaxy. No one thought they could stand against the might of the Zorth Empire, but now the humans had turned the tables. The Zorth, once the feared rulers of space, were being pushed back, forced to fight for their survival. And Ethan knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. They had a long way to go before the Zorth realized the true strength of humanity. "All hands, prepare for the next strike," Ethan ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We take this fight to them, they will learn today that no one is safe from the humans." The battle continued to rage in the cold void of space. The stars flickered in the distance, the only light in the vast darkness of the battlefield. The Zorth Empire had never been challenged like this before. Their once proud fleet, used to dominating entire sectors of the galaxy, was now on the defensive, forced to retreat in disarray. Captain Ethan stood on the command deck of the Resolute, watching the chaos unfold before him. His crew worked quickly, responding to the Zortha's retaliatory strikes with the precision that had made them a formidable force. The sudden shock of the human attack had sent ripples throughout the Zorth ranks, but now, as expected, they were starting to regroup and adjust their formations. "They're trying to push us back," Lieutenant Harper said steadily. Ethan nodded, his mind working rapidly. He had anticipated that the Zorth would try to regain control, but what he hadn't expected was how quickly they could adapt. The Zorth had underestimated humanity's ability to learn and strike back, and now they were about to learn what happens when you push humans into a corner. "We can't let them regain the upper hand," Ethan said in a low but firm voice. "Focus all fire on their command ship. If we take that down, their forces will fall apart." Harper nodded, her fingers flying over the controls. The human ships, agile and smaller than their Zorth counterparts, darted through the battlefield, dodging enemy fire with ease. The Zorth, unable to keep up with their speed, struggled to land a hit. Ethan's eyes flicked to the tactical display, where the Zorth command ship appeared as a massive, imposing silhouette against the backdrop of the stars. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by smaller Zorth warships, but it was also their most vulnerable point. If they could disable it, the rest of the fleet would crumble. "All ships, focus on that command ship," Ethan ordered. "We break their command comm, and the rest will fall into chaos." The Resolute and the rest of the human fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing with deadly accuracy. The Zorth responded with fury, firing their most advanced weapons. The vacuum of space was filled with the soundless echoes of explosions as the two fleets clashed, each side trying to claim control of the battlefield. "We're taking hits, Captain," shouted the ship's engineer, his voice laced with urgency. "Shields are holding, but we can't take many more hits like that." Ethan gritted his teeth. They were close, they had to push through, no matter the cost. "Hold steady. We've got this," he said, trying to reassure his crew, though his heart pounded with anxiety. They were far from safe. Then, a sudden shift, the Zorth command ship began to break away from its fleet, moving to a safer position behind its defensive perimeter. It was clear they were trying to protect it with everything they had. The human forces, undeterred, pushed forward even harder. "We can't let them regroup," Lieutenant Harper said intensely. "We've got one shot at this. If we lose it, they'll retaliate with everything they've got." Ethan's mind raced. He had seen the Zorth retaliate before, but this time the stakes were much higher. He knew they couldn't afford a second chance. If they hesitated now, the balance of the battle could tip in the Zortha's favor. "Get us closer," Ethan ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're going for it, no more holding back." The ship surged forward, cutting through the chaos as the crew focused all their efforts on taking down the command ship. The Zorth were doing everything they could to defend it, launching counterattacks from every direction, but the humans were relentless. The human fleet had something the Zorth didn't: determination. Every shot fired from the Resolute was one step closer to their goal. The Zorth ships began to falter, their formations broke down as they scrambled to protect their command ship, but they weren't quick enough. "Fire on the command ship's weak spot," Ethan barked. "We've got them now." A barrage of energy blasts hit the Zorth command ship, each shot finding its mark. The Zorth commander, watching from his bridge, couldn't believe what he was seeing. His once invincible fleet was crumbling before his eyes. This can't be happening, the Zorth commander muttered, panic creeping into his voice. The Zorth command ship, now heavily damaged, shuddered under the onslaught. Explosions rocked its hull as it began to break apart, its defenses failing one by one. "We've got them!" Harper shouted, her face breaking into a grin. But Ethan knew better than to celebrate too soon, there was still more to be done. The rest of the fleet was still out there, and they weren't about to let humanity win so easily. "Keep pushing forward," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "We've broken their command, now we finish this." The tide of battle had shifted, but the war was far from over. The humans had proven they were more than a match for the Zorth, but as the battle raged on, they would soon find out just how far the Zorth would go to protect their empire. The explosion of the Zorth command ship echoed through the battlefield, sending shock waves across the galaxy. Even as the massive vessel broke apart, the Zorth forces didn't crumble as expected. They were a people known for their resilience, and now their true strength was about to be revealed. Captain Ethan watched the battlefield unfold before him. The Zorth fleet had been thrown into disarray, but the remaining ships were rallying together, forming a last-ditch defensive perimeter. Their remaining ships were heavier, more durable, and had been reinforced with the best weapons they could manage. "We've taken down their command ship, Captain," Lieutenant Harper reported, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. "But they're regrouping, they're not going down without a fight." Ethan nodded, gripping the edge of the command console. He knew this was coming, the Zorth were not the type to surrender easily. This was their last chance to hold on to their empire, and they'd throw everything they had into it. "Deploy all fighters," Ethan ordered. "We can't let them recover. If we give them a chance, they'll launch a counterattack like nothing we've ever seen." Harper immediately gave the orders, and a wave of human fighter ships surged from the Resolute. They darted across the battlefield, small but agile, weaving between the larger warships, their weapons blazing as they took on the Zorth defensive lines. The human fighters were quick, but the Zorth's remaining ships were tougher than expected. They were using their strongest ships as shields, the tactical officer reported as he analyzed the enemy formation. "If we don't take down those battleships, the smaller ships won't be able to get through," Ethan said, his eyes narrowing. He knew this was it, the Zorth were making their final stand. The remaining battleships in their fleet were well armored but slow, and that was where humanity's advantage lay. The human ships were smaller, more maneuverable, and they had learned from the mistakes of the past. "We have to break through their front lines," Ethan said firmly. "We can't waste time, every minute we delay is another chance for them to regroup. All ships, focus fire on their frontmost battleships, take them down and open a gap for the fighters." The Resolute and the rest of the human fleet turned their attention to the Zorth front lines. The two sides collided with fierce intensity, massive energy blasts lighting up the dark void of space. The Zorth fought back with everything they had, but they were at a disadvantage. Their ships might have been more powerful, but the human ships were faster, using their agility to stay one step ahead. Ethan hit the console as another Zorth battleship exploded in front of them. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining Zorth forces launched an unexpected counterattack, pushing the humans back. The battlefield shifted, and the humans found themselves struggling to maintain their position. "Shields down to 30%. Captain," shouted the engineer. "We need to fall back, or we'll lose the Resolute." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to let panic set in. If they retreated now, everything they had fought for would be in vain, the Zorth would regroup and come after them with vengeance. "No retreat!" Ethan shouted. "Push forward, we can't stop now." As the Resolute and the human fleet advanced, the Zorth's remaining ships unleashed a brutal barrage of firepower. It was clear they had nothing left to lose. The remaining Zorth battleships were closing in, their weapons aimed directly at the Resolute. The human fleet's shields flickered under the pressure. "Captain, if we don't act now, we'll lose everything," Harper said urgently. "Their final line is too strong, we need a way to break through." Ethan's mind raced as he scanned the battlefield. The Zorth were aggressive, but their last-ditch efforts had left them vulnerable. Their remaining battleships were heavily armed, but their defensive systems had been stretched thin trying to protect each other. "That's it," Ethan muttered to himself. "We go for the weak point." He turned to Harper. "Prepare the Resolute for a direct assault. All fighters, prepare for a coordinated strike on their rear flank." The human fleet shifted their focus, leaving the front battleships behind to concentrate on the Zorth's more vulnerable rear. As the human ships moved into position, the Zorth forces realized too late what was happening. "Now!" Ethan ordered. The human fleet surged forward, using their speed to outmaneuver the Zorth battleships. The fighters swooped in behind the Zorth rear, attacking their weak points with deadly precision. The Zorth, unable to keep up with the sudden shift in attack, found their defenses crumbling one by one. The battleships began to fall, explosions ripped through their hulls, their shields buckling under the onslaught. The humans had found their way in, and the Zorth were finally beginning to retreat. But Ethan knew better than to celebrate. The war wasn't over, not even close. "We've broken their back," Harper said breathlessly, but Ethan's face remained grim. "Stay sharp," he said. "This isn't over yet. We've won a battle, but the war is far from finished." As the Zorth fleet began retreating into the vastness of space, Ethan knew the hardest part was yet to come. The humans had delivered a crushing blow, but the Zorth weren't going to let this loss go without a fight. Soon, the humans would face an even greater challenge. The battle had shifted, but it wasn't over. The Zorth were regrouping, retreating into the deep expanse of space, but they weren't defeated. Ethan stood at the helm of the Resolute, watching as the battle-damaged ships limped back to the safety of their formation. It wasn't a complete victory yet. "Status report." Ethan commanded, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. "Shields are at 50%. "Captain," Lieutenant Harper replied, "we've lost 4 ships in the fleet, and many of the others are severely damaged. But we've pushed them back for now, they're retreating." "That's not enough," Ethan muttered. "They're regrouping. We can't let them prepare for another strike. They're in disarray, but they'll pull themselves together." Harper added in a strained voice, "We can't be sure how long we have before they make their next move." Ethan clenched his fists. The Zorth were dangerous and relentless. The humans had managed to land a critical blow, but the Zorth would never give up so easily. They would lick their wounds, rebuild their forces, and return with everything they had. The question wasn't if they would strike again, it was when. "Prepare for the worst," Ethan ordered. "Patch up the ships as best as you can, we'll be ready if they come back." Even as he said those words, his mind raced with doubt. The Zorth weren't just a military force, they were a symbol of fear across the galaxy. Everyone feared them because they had the power to crush entire civilizations. But now, for the first time, humans had forced them to retreat, and in the depths of space, that single fact was enough to shift the balance of power. The Zorth had always believed themselves untouchable, but now they knew they weren't. The entire galaxy would take notice, and that included more than just the Zorth. As the human fleet moved into defensive positions, a strange sense of unease settled over Ethan. He looked up, staring at the holographic display of the galaxy. The map showed the familiar constellations of the Zorth Empire, but now there were anomalies in the data, strange ships, unfamiliar signatures, and encrypted communications. "Sir, we're picking up strange signals on the outer rim," said Nine Drake from the communications deck. "It's not Zorth, these are something else, something we haven't encountered before." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Can you triangulate their position?" "Affirmative. It's a fleet of unknown origin, and they're heading in our direction. We think it's some kind of reinforcement, but we don't have full data yet." A new wave of fear swept over Ethan. "Reinforcements from who and why? Do we have any information on their capabilities?" he asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Nothing solid yet, but the energy readings are high, too high for any known species in this sector, Drake replied. This isn't just a routine military move. Whoever these new ships are, they have the power to challenge everything the humans have worked for. They must have been watching the battle, Harper said quietly. They saw the Zorth retreat, and now they're coming to fill the void. Ethan nodded slowly. It was the only explanation that made sense. The Zorth weren't the only ones looking for control. With the Zortha's power weakened, other factions would inevitably seek to take their place. Ethan stood silently, contemplating the unknown fleet headed their way. The universe was vast, and as much as humanity had gained ground, there were forces in the dark corners of space that would stop at nothing to seize control. Humanity had made an enemy of the Zorth, but now they had also caught the attention of something far more dangerous, something that wouldn't hesitate to crush them if they were weak. The question was no longer just about the Zorth. The battle for the galaxy was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. We can't afford to underestimate them, Ethan said finally, determination filling his voice. Prepare the fleet. This new threat isn't just a challenge, it's a message. A message? Harper asked, confusion crossing her face. They're telling us that we're no longer the only players in this game, Ethan replied. And we're going to need every bit of strength we have to survive. As the unknown fleet drew closer, the humans braced themselves. They had taken down the Zorth, but now they had to face something far more insidious. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this battle would be unlike anything they had ever faced before. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity was about to find out just how much danger they were truly in. In this part, the suspense grew. The arrival of an unknown fleet suggested an even bigger challenge was coming. It kept everyone on edge, wondering who these new players were and what threat they posed. The shift in power, along with the introduction of a mysterious new threat, deepened the intrigue and set the stage for even higher stakes. As the strange fleet drew closer, tension rippled through the human fleet like an electric current. Ethan stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. The unknown ships were unlike anything they had encountered before, sleek, angular, and emitting strange energy readings that only deepened the mystery. The crew worked tirelessly to analyze the data, but every new piece of information brought more questions than answers. Sir, we've picked up a transmission from the unknown fleet. It's in a language we've never seen before. We can't even begin to decode it, Harper spoke up, her voice tight with concern. Ethan's grip tightened around the armrest of his chair. What does that mean? Are they preparing for a fight? Harper hesitated. We don't know. The message is repeating every few minutes. It's almost like a warning, but there's nothing in it we can make sense of. Great, Ethan muttered under his breath. The situation was rapidly deteriorating, and they didn't have enough answers to act decisively. A warning or a threat, it could mean anything. Captain, IGN Drake's voice crackled through the intercom, we're picking up additional readings, the energy levels are off the charts, far beyond anything we've encountered, and we believe they're targeting us. The cold weight of fear settled over Ethan. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a minor skirmish. Whoever these aliens were, they were coming for the humans, and they weren't coming with peaceful intentions. Prepare for battle, Ethan ordered, his voice low but firm. But we're not starting this fight. We'll stand our ground, and we won't fire unless provoked. The command was met with a quick acknowledgement from the bridge crew, and the human fleet began to position itself in a defensive formation. Ethan's mind raced, he couldn't afford to make a rash decision. If these ships were truly as powerful as the reading suggested, a full-scale engagement could mean the end of everything. Yet, they couldn't back down. They had already made enemies of the Zorth, and now they were facing something far more dangerous. Retreat wasn't an option. The hours stretched on as they waited, tension knotting Ethan's nerves. Every minute felt like a ticking time bomb, and the unknown fleet was drawing closer, their intent still shrouded in mystery. Captain, we've analyzed the signal one more time. There's something strange about it. It's not just a threat or a warning, it's a call. A call, Ethan repeated, furrowing his brow. Yes, It's like they're broadcasting something to the rest of the galaxy. They're trying to summon something, but what? Harper replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The hair on the back of Ethan's neck stood up. This was no longer just a matter of survival, it was a matter of what else was out there, who else was listening. The Zorth might be defeated, but this new threat was part of something far bigger. They were calling for reinforcements, or, worse, allies. Suddenly, the calm of space was shattered by a loud, shrieking alarm. The unknown fleet was no longer holding back. Massive energy blasts surged toward the human fleet, striking one of the outer ships with incredible force. The explosion lit up the void of space, a burst of light so bright it temporarily blinded the crew. "Return fire!" Ethan shouted as the bridge went into full alert. "Weapons, full power. We won't let them take us down without a fight." The Resolute jolted as the first wave of energy blasts hit its shields, but they held strong. The human ships retaliated with their own weaponry, firing back with precision. Yet the unknown fleet's vessels were faster and more resilient than anything they had faced before. As the battle raged on, the question that loomed over Ethan was no longer just how to win, it was whether they could even survive this fight. The unknown fleet had made their intentions clear, they were here to destroy the humans. The hum of the engines, the crackle of the weapons, and the flashes of light in the vastness of space all blurred together in a chaotic dance of destruction. But in the midst of it all, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whoever these aliens were, they had come for something far beyond a simple battle, this was an invasion of the highest order. As the first wave of destruction seemed to subside, the true horror set in. The fleet wasn't alone. More ships were emerging from the dark void of space, their shapes barely visible at first, but soon growing into monstrous forms that dwarfed the human vessels. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They were massive, sprawling, and filled with power. It was as if the unknown fleet was not only here to challenge the humans but to bring an entire army to bear. Ethan's heart raced as he processed the terrifying reality before them. The Zorth were nothing compared to what was now emerging from the shadows. "This isn't just a battle," Ethan said, his voice filled with grim realization. "This is a war." The human fleet's shields flickered under the relentless barrage of alien fire. Ethan gripped the edge of his chair tightly, his knuckles turning white. The Resolute had taken some serious hits, but it was holding its ground. His crew, though battle-hardened, had never faced anything like this before. The unknown fleet possessed far more firepower, and their ships were unlike any human technology. "Captain, we're losing ships at an alarming rate. We can't sustain this for much longer, we need a plan." Harper's voice rang through the bridge urgently. Ethan looked around, his mind racing. They had no choice but to fight back with everything they had, but what could they do against an enemy that seemed unstoppable? How could they even think of victory when they were outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed? "Are the fleet weapons ready?" Ethan asked, trying to sound calm. "They're as ready as they can be, but we're limited," replied IGN Drake, his voice tight. "We can't launch another round of heavy fire until we recharge, and that's not going to give us enough time." He muttered, staring at the holographic display of the enemy fleet in the distance. Then, the first of the alien reinforcements arrived. Their massive ships filled the view screen, they were incomprehensibly large, bigger than anything humanity had ever seen. Their sheer scale was enough to instill terror in even the most seasoned soldiers. A strange hum vibrated through the ship, a low, almost imperceptible sound that seemed to resonate deep within Ethan's bones. He didn't have time to analyze it, but the feeling of something unnatural was too strong to ignore. "Captain, there's something off about their formations," Harper said again. "They're not attacking in the usual tactical way, it's almost as if they're waiting for something. I don't know what." But suddenly, the alien ship shifted. A massive, glowing portal opened in space, a swirling vortex of energy that bent the very fabric of space itself. Ethan's eyes widened. "This isn't just a fleet, it's a force unlike anything we can comprehend. The portal expanded, sending waves of strange energy pulsing through the battlefield. What is that? Ethan breathed, trying to make sense of it. It's a dimensional rift, Harper said. They're opening some kind of gateway, but for what purpose? Ethan's mind reeled. A rift meant that reinforcements weren't just coming from the ships, they could see it was the opening of an entire dimension, a force of untold power about to spill into their reality. No, Ethan said, his voice firm with determination. We can't let them get any further. They'll tear this entire galaxy apart. Harper's hands flew over her console. I've got an idea. If I can reroute the power from our shields to the main cannon, we may be able to fire a concentrated blast right into the heart of that rift. But it's going to be a risk, it could destabilize our shields completely. Ethan's eyes darted between the viewport and Harper's station. The rift was growing wider by the second. The unknown fleet was preparing to pour through, and once that happened, there would be no telling what would emerge. We're running out of time. Do it. Ethan commanded. We have no other choice. Harper nodded, her fingers flying over the console as she rerouted the ship's power. The hum of energy coursing through the Resolute was intense, and the entire ship seemed to tremble. Ethan's grip on the chair tightened again, this was their only shot. Ready, Captain, Harper said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. Ethan stared at the growing rift on the screen. Without hesitation, he shouted, "Fire the Resolute's main cannon." In an instant, a blinding burst of energy, a beam of concentrated power, tore through space itself, shooting toward the rift with blinding speed.